Hey kid, you like artifacts? Don't worry, the first one's on me. Looking for more? Oh, don't worry, the second one? It's also free. You may be wondering, Cardboard, how are you making anything off of giving out artifacts for free? Well, the answer to that just might surprise you. I don't really know the answer, I'm just kind of winging it, but whatever the answer is or ends up being just might surprise you. Okay, you know what? Here, just have all the artifacts. I don't even want them anymore. Artifacts are stupid and old and boring, and besides that, I've already moved on to something way better called NFTs, which are made by AI. Ayesha Tanaka armor is a 5 mana value 2/4 legendary human artificer. When she attacks, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You can put any number of artifact cards with mana value less than or equal to Ayesha's power onto the battlefield tapped, and then put the rest of those cards in the bottom of your deck in any order. Additionally, if the defending player has 3 or more artifacts, that player cannot block Ayesha. Now the important part here is that each individual artifact with mana value less than or equal to Ayesha's power comes into play for free. So if you attack with a 2 power Ayesha, as is her base, and you have 4 2-mana rocks on top of your library, you can put them all into play for free. Wild, right? It's kind of hard to think that Ayesha isn't like an insanely popular commander. Now this deck will be considered a bit low budget for me, which means it only includes commons up to $1, uncommons up to 4, and rares and or mythics up to 2. With a total price of between $35 and $70, this one comes in just under $50. And I realize this is kind of a weird system, but I think this does actually provide some challenge to deck building, with enough flexibility in the uncommon slots to still have some really useful tools to make up for the budget constraints in the common or rare and mythic tiers. Now the official bracket for this deck would be 2, though I would say this is way more powerful than a precon right out of the box. I would say this might play more like a 3, but it only runs 1 really bad tutor and no game changers, so prepare to get your ass blown out if you happen to play at a table of fully optimized 3s, such as the bracket system. For power level, I would probably rate this in the 6 to 7 range. It does have explosive starts and can theoretically knock a single player out relatively quickly, but it doesn't have a ton of quick kill potential against the whole table, meaning you are a threat to one person, but not everyone at once. Overall, this deck will be strong against people who have a lot of artifacts kind of willy-nilly, since Ayesha can become unblockable and then swing unimpeded if your opponents have 3 or more artifacts. You'll also have success against decks without a lot of artifact removal since you will have a lot of artifacts. You'll be weak to commander removal, and while the deck can function without the commander, it's crazy go nuts with the commander. We'll run some cheap protection cards and cheap counter spells to try and keep Ayesha on the board as long as we can, all while leveraging powerful equipment to make her larger than removal can deal with, or make her immune, indestructible, and otherwise safe. I'll have a full link to the deck list in the description below, as well as a link to my Patreon where members will have a companion video to this where I go over all the card alternatives I considered, some for higher budgets, some for higher bracket play, and we'll go over the EDH rec page for Ayesha where I'll comment on the most popular cards for it. If you like what you see here, feel free to check it out and become a member. Without further ado, I proudly present to you Armor, I Hardly Knew Her. We start with a package called Fast Equip because these are all artifacts that Ayesha can get into play for free and can immediately give her a bonus. For example, hitting Cliffhaven Kitesail or Hook Blade will immediately attach themselves onto Ayesha, giving her some level of evasion. Since Ayesha triggers on attack, the evasion or any further bonuses from Fast Equip type cards will apply before the block step, which is handy if you get something like Assassin Gauntlet. The Gauntlet will equip to Ayesha as well as tap all creatures target opponent controls. You generally will want to choose the person you are attacking so that they can't block. The Gauntlet will also get you a buff for future Ayesha attacks as well as a loot. Celestial Armor and Maul the Skyclaves will buff power for future and bigger Ayesha attacks. The Maul will give more toughness, while the armor will give hexproof and indestructible on the turn it comes into play. Both will give Ayesha flying. The last card is not an equipment, but it can immediately buff Ayesha, and that is Sword of the Chosen. Sword is also nice since you can not use it, save it for the opponent's turns to give Ayesha more toughness, or you can buff Ayesha if your opponent decides to block and potentially save Ayesha from dying. Usually I wait to present the Sculpting package till later since most of the time it's just standard card draw or card value. But the Sculpting package for Ayesha does have a few spicy inclusions. And since YouTube prefers longer watch times, I will withhold the good shit until the end of the section. For now, enjoy the basic bitch Sculpting cards, including such classics as Thought Monitor and Arcanist Owl, which are both fine Sculpting cards but can also be put into play with Ayesha's ability. Mystic Forge and Pure Steel Paladin can both get you a buttload of cards, since most of the deck is artifacts and a large chunk of those artifacts are equipments. But here's where things get spicy. I'll use Loyal Inventor as the prime example. Loyal Inventor will let you search your library for an artifact, reveal it, and if you control an assassin, you can keep that card in your hand. This deck does not run any assassins. That's because we want the bad condition on the card, in this case to put it on top of your library. We want this because it essentially lets us choose at least one guaranteed hit from Ayesha on the next attack trigger. So not only is it a tutor, it's a tutor for a spell that then has no cost. Pretty good, right? To further press that advantage, we run the Brain Syndicate. Brainstorm, Brainstone, and Brain Surge. All have similar effects, that of drawing some cards then putting any cards from your hand on the top of your library. Not just the cards that you drew, but anything that was in your hand. These are really nice because not only do you usually guarantee an Ayesha flop, but if your hand is full of large artifacts, which we will get to later, it's much better to be able to put those on top and then put them into play for free. You won't be able to flop large things naturally, so we need to pump Ayesha up a bit. Who would have thought that a video containing the words naturally large and flop would exist in monetized video in 2025? YouTube, please don't demonetize this, I am begging you. Now these options I've chosen based mostly around budget. There are some upgrades you can make if you want to break the budget, and those will be covered in my addendum video on Patreon. For example, Lava Spur boots can be replaced by Swiftfoot boots or Lightning Greaves. I run Lava Spur boots to knock off a few bucks off the total cost of the deck, and because it isn't in literally every commander deck built since the invention of putting things on your feet to protect them from rough terrain and Legos. Plate armor will fill a similar role, giving some protection, but with an upside that this will fatten Ayesha up real good, and will be pretty cheap to equip most of the time, if not free. Hero's Blade is like the opposite of a fast equip card, where this will attach itself when Ayesha or another legend comes into play. Also, it's very handy if your Ayesha gets killed, since the extra commander tax can chew into your equipment mana, and this will equip itself for free. Hero's Heirloom and Sword of Vengeance are both solid buffers that will give Ayesha a variety of traits like Trample, Haste, etc. These are fine, but I would probably swap these two out specifically if you want to raise the budget or raise the power or raise the roof by putting more powerful and generally more expensive equipment in. Putting small artifacts and mana rocks into play is fun and all, but we all want to see Ayesha drop some big ol' artifacts onto the field, so we run a package of what I like to call big flops. We'll start flopping with Cybership and the Pridwin Steel Flagship. Both of these are sizable vehicles in their own right, but we'll also start making an army of 2/2s to help diversify your threats away from just Ayesha. Duplicant is a good removal flop in that you essentially steal a non-token creature. Wizard Spellbook will help with some graveyard control, as well as get you some spells to cast, possibly free or very cheap. Now you don't get the cool use any color of mana to cast these spells type effect if you roll a 1 through 9, but more than half the time you'll get it for pretty free or pretty cheap and within your color boundaries. We finish out the flops with Triplicate Titan and Salvation Colossus. Triplicate Titan is a big boy who can become many little boys once killed, providing some resiliency. Salvation Colossus is also a big boy, but will make your other boys medium boys when they attack. All good things must come to an end, and this package will look to leverage your plethora of artifacts to end the game. Unfortunately, it seems that all bad things will never end, like the last 3 years that we've had crammed into the last 3 months. It just never ends. Like the constructs from Thousand Moon Smithy. You'll get one that gets bigger for each artifact and or creature you control. Once you flip it to its land side, then anytime you cast an artifact or creature with its mana, you'll get another one, and another one, and another one, like a DJ Khaled hit. I should note that the artifacts you can tap to flip Thousand Moon Smithy can include itself, but also your equipment, since those don't need to tap to do anything or activate and can still be used for their bonuses if they are tapped. The same goes for the Improvise on Kappa Cannoneer and the Draw ability of Shimmer Dragon, which are both tough to deal with beaters. Going back to the construct strategy, we run 3 more cards that further that type of goal. Nettle Cyst and Master of Ethereum are kinds of constructs, let's say constructs with benefits, either buffing your other constructs or letting you turn another creature into a construct. Additionally, Digsite Engineer will pump out constructs and act as like a second Thousand Moon Smithy that comes pre-flipped. Rounding out your endgame are spells that will turn all your artifacts into animated creatures that like to sing and dance and are held prisoner by some kind of lion man. Dance of the Manse will return your artifacts from the graveyard to the battlefield, and they'll be animated if you spend 6 or more on the X value. Similarly, Rise and Shine will animate all your artifacts if they aren't dead. Try the gray stuff, it's delicious. Don't believe me? Ask the dishers. Sometimes when building a commander deck, you have cards that don't really fit a synergy or type or theme. They're just Good. And here are 4 good cards that are in this deck. Sculpting Steel will become a copy of an artifact that you already have in play. That's good. Iron Soul Enforcer will let you return an artifact from your graveyard to the battlefield if you attack with just it or just Ayesha. That's good. Forensic Gadgeteer will investigate when you cast an artifact spell and reduces the artifact's activation cost by 1 to a minimum of at least 1. That is good. Ethercast Knight can get flopped out by Ayesha with just her base power, and will give her a buff when she attacks alone, which she will most likely be doing anyways. That's good. And now here's something completely different. We aren't quite a Voltron deck, but we do most of our heavy lifting by sending our commander into the attack zone. That makes our commander pretty vulnerable, so we need to protect it some. Let's start with an offer you can't refuse. This will protect your Ayesha for just 1 mana, and the trade-off of that being giving your opponent 2 treasure tokens, which is bad. But remember that Ayesha is unblockable if your opponent controls 3 artifacts, so those treasures could make a difference in making Ayesha unblockable, which is good. However, your opponent can just sacrifice them and then your Ayesha becomes blockable, which is bad. But then that means you played an offer you can't refuse with basically no downside, which is good. I don't think either situation is super important, but it is something to consider and will make you look clever when you point it out at the table. Lauren's Escape and Blacksmith's Skill will protect your Ayesha, as well as any number of your artifacts, at the premium mana cost of 1. Haystack and K9 Mark I are both protection in the form of floppable artifacts. K9 gives ward as well as another means of making Ayesha unblockable. Haystack adds another tier of protection in phasing, which will allow Ayesha to keep all her equipments, well, equipped. We finish up the protection with Bastion Protector, because it literally has protect in the title. That it kind of makes it an auto-include. I mean, I don't make the rules, so just kind of go with what's in the comprehensive rules. Let's go on to the next section. I run 4 wipes, including Supreme Verdict and Austere Command, which are pretty basic and obvious, but powerful nonetheless. More in tune with the synergies of the deck are Divine Reckoning, which will let you creature wipe but save Ayesha. Plus it has flashback, so that's like running an extra wipe. We also run Organic Extinction because we can leverage the fact that we'll have a lot of artifacts to potentially improvise this out for a minuscule cost, as well as destroying just non-artifact creatures, meaning we'll have plenty of artifact creatures left to press an advantage. I run 6 spells in my interaction package, and they are mostly interchangeable with any other interaction that you would prefer. If you think more counterspells is better, run more counterspells. Or pick a package more tuned with your meta. If there's a lot of graveyard decks, run more graveyard control. You know, do what fits for you. One that I would recommend specifically in this deck is Darksteel Mutation, which is a terrific removal spell that can shut down an opposing commander if needed. But it also turns a target into an artifact, which could help you with Ayesha's 3 artifact breakpoint for unblockability. Other than that, just have fun with it and run what appeals to you most. I've separated the ramp into 2 sections, Normal Ramp and Spicy Ramp. The normal ramp is fairly normal and consists of the Gruesome Twosome Arcane Signet and Soul Ring, as well as 4 other 2-mana ramp artifacts, of which I would point out that Liquid Metal Torque is good to give an opponent another artifact for that 3 artifact breakpoint that we talked about before. In addition, I run Sonic Screwdriver, which can also make Ayesha unblockable. Since Ayesha costs 5, I'm okay dipping into some 3-mana rocks, since I can still cast the rock on turn 3 and accelerate into Ayesha 1 turn early. The Spicy Ramp is a small package that will ramp Ayesha at a turn early, but also provide additional power to Ayesha. Heraldic Banner will give her +1/+0, but you do need to pick a color to buff everything else. Ayesha will get the buff regardless because she's both colors, but consider the potential creatures you will have imminent access to, and I'm sure you'll be fine. I then run the Strength and Endurance Bobblehead. Strength will allow you to put +1/+1 counters on Ayesha, while Endurance will give Ayesha a temporary power buff and some protection while attacking. Now, neither Bobblehead will really break the game open, and it's not a Bobblehead deck, so you're not going to get super power out of these, but these individually just give you a little bit of power in the ramp slots. My utility land package is a tad larger than normal because I run 5 artifact lands that are solely there to get put into play with Ayesha's ability. For now I run Seed of the Synod, Darksteel Citadel, Ancient Den, Razortide Bridge, and Power Depot, of which I really don't know what it does off the top of my head or that it has any function other than being an artifact land. I mean, to me it's just the second Darksteel Citadel that comes into play tapped and can be destroyed. Access Tunnel and Rogue's Passage will get Ayesha through combat unblocked, though keep in mind that Ayesha with enough buffs will outgrow Access Tunnel. However, if you have buffs like the bobbleheads or Sword of the Chosen, you can make Ayesha unblockable, then apply the buffs afterwards. I finished the utility lands with Castle Vantress and Cathedral of War. The castle will let you scout the top of your deck a bit to see if you may hit something with Ayesha, and if there's nothing there, you can put them on the bottom. Cathedral will work as a free buff for when Ayesha attacks alone, which will happen most of the time, especially in the early game. I run 27 mana lands, and when combined with the 9 utility lands, that gives the deck a total of 36 lands, of which 9 are islands and 11 are plains. I run 7 lands that can produce Azorius, and they are mostly budget choices. Obviously, Command Tower is good in Commander, and it's inexpensive. But these will shift depending on your budget. Feel free to run what you have and maybe take a few basics out for some more dual lands if you want a more smoother mana base. And that's my take on Ayesha Tanaka Armorer. This is one of the more explosive decks that I've made, and if you up the power or budget a bit, it can be a really powerful deck on any table. If you're looking for a more traditional Voltron style deck, check out my deck tech for Captain America. And if you want a more traditional Azorius deck, you can check out the Safara God of the Pulse deck, which might still be my favorite deck of all time. Thank you for watching, and feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this content. And until the next time, I will see you around.